Okay, I'd like to start the Finance Committee meeting on July 5th, 2022. Present are committee members Limpert and Williamson. Councilman Glassburn has recused himself for this topic. On the agenda is Ordinance 2022-62, which is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to negotiate and enter into an agreement with the North Olmsted Board of Education to purchase school district-owned real property commonly known as Forest Elementary School and Spruce Elementary School in consideration of $4 million. Madam Mayor, would you like to go or should I pass it? Go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The city is bringing this contract forward to council this evening for the purchase of 2 school properties because I believe it's important for the city to have control of the properties once they are no longer in school use. There's no question that both Spruce and Forest are now offline and the schools will be done using them completely later this fall. My administration will not sit idly by and let these vacant buildings attract crime in our residential neighborhoods. A quick Google search will show you that many communities where a lack of planning has led to vacant school buildings which have been standing for years. All of us know the types of unwanted activities that take place in vacant property. This is not the kind of nuisance that I want in our neighborhoods. Previous North Olmsted administrations did not have great working relationships with the schools to the detriment of our taxpayers. I'm committed to ensuring that the city works with the school district where it can to leverage the best use of taxpayer dollars at the lowest possible cost. I think purchasing these properties from the schools is one way of doing so. There are opportunities at the Spruce property for us to continue with water retention and other flooding remediation issues for our city. Another thing about the agreement in front of you this evening is to ensure that the city has first right of refusal on Chestnut, Maple, and Pine school properties. Given the location of these 3 properties, along with Forest, which will be purchased as part of this agreement, it is important for the city to control what happens with these properties. It's not known when or if the school district will no longer need the 3 additional properties, but I want to ensure the city has an opportunity to get them whenever they do become available. In addition to potentially fulfilling recreational needs, North Olmsted is 98% built out. I want to ensure that our city has control over the last few developable acres of land to facilitate future development that benefits our city, and it also demonstrates respect for the adjoining property owners. And Mr. Chairman, obviously our law director and finance director are here to answer council questions along with our economic and community development director Upton. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So first question that I had is related to what is the position, and I've heard residents bring this up, and I have my own perception of what this looks like, but what is the cost that we would incur beyond the $4 million related to transfer of this property? Does that $4 million all go to the school, or are there additional costs that we would incur for transfers of title? In the addendum, it doesn't have a dollar value related to that. So is that part of the $4 million, or is that additional costs related to the transfer?
Mr. Chairman, there are typically there's an allocation of costs that are incidental to the transfer of real estate. It could be title policies, things of that nature. There are no taxes on this particular piece of property, so we don't have anything to deal with there. Real estate taxes, things of that nature. But there's usually title work, preparation of deeds, things like that. It's not a extraordinary amount of money, but title policies, if you purchase them. I don't have the estimate sitting here that I could give to you, but I can certainly get it and forward it to you. It's not the $4 million is allocated toward the seller, but there are, just like the transfer of property, the swap that we did recently, we talked about, that's actually just getting finished up. There are title fees and things like that do come into play. Escrow, there'll be an escrow fee since the money's going to go through an escrow agent, but these are not, and we're not talking about tens of thousands of dollars or anything like that at all. So.
And then just kind of a follow-up as it relates to, and again, this is more, I think, for just the way a resident should think of this. How would you answer, what's your philosophy on a position that a resident taxpayer is paying for this land again by having it transferred from the school system to the city.
If the finance director wants to jump in, but simply put, the city tax dollars that come in through property tax are kept completely separate than the property tax dollars that come into the school district. So while a property owner is paying one tax bill to Cuyahoga County, that money is then split. And so the city does not see or realize any of the money that the school district sees or realizes. And then same as the school district does not see the pot of money that the city gets from property taxes.
So essentially, go ahead, Ms. Kupfer.
I think that I might also want to add, I don't have the exact purchase dates of those properties, but I think that they're pretty old. They've been in the district for quite some time, and if you look at the assessed valuation, the land value was not that much relative to the value of the property. So, yeah, probably at some point when those parcels were bought, tax dollars were used to buy that. But it's a completely different value now than what it was back then.
Mr. Garot.
Just in follow-up to that, my recollection is that back in the 60s, when these were constructed, even into the 50s, oftentimes when there was a developer, part of the development plan, the city and the school district worked together to ensure that there was some space set aside and it was available for the development of schools. You couldn't do that today. It's not part of a development plan that we would consider today, but back in the 50s and 60s, frequently, that's why you see it in the neighborhoods that were developing at that time, that frequently it corresponded with it. I'm not sure that there was an exchange of money at the time by the school district, as opposed to just the property was deeded as part of the overall development plan. That's my recollection, but again, that's my hearing the story over the course of time as to where it came from. This isn't recent research, but this is me thinking back because you asked the question, that I had heard that at one point, that's the relationship between the property and the neighboring subdivision that was built. Typically, it was part of a development plan, as I recall, and I'm not sure that there was a exchange of money as more or less just a part of the overall plan, and the school district was able to build it. That's my recollection as to what happened there. Kind of dovetails off of what Ms. Kopfer said.
And may I add, doesn't a title search like determine that value, like that lineage?
Yeah, you'll have the lineage. It won't
Yeah, so-
necessarily, I don't know if the title search will come back and say exactly what the compensation
Right.
paid was at the time, the fees, the sum paid at the time for the transfer, but you'll certainly know the history of if it came from the development corporation or the developer directly over the district or to the city to the district. But I think that's what you'll find when we look at it further.
So would it be fair to say, as we as a council or as a resident, this is really a transfer cost of tax revenue from the city to the school system from a budgetary standpoint? Is that a fair way to think of it? Well, obviously, we're getting an asset in return of school property, but from a taxpayer's income tax perspective, they've paid it to a city entity, and that money is going from the city budget to the school budget.
It is, it may not be exactly where it's funded from, but I think I understand what you're saying is that the taxpayers are taking it from the left pocket and putting it in the right pocket, but we're gaining value that the mayor has spelled out, and the school district is deriving a benefit because then they'll have resources to help move forward their development plan at Birch, so I guess that's what essentially.
Yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
And then just going in that direction, so the current assessed value is less than the purchase price that is being asked for. Is that correct? The appraised value?
Correct.
Okay. So what type of value do we see, or do we have any ideas of of the value you think we'll obtain related to the two properties for what we could do with it? And is there some potentially earmarked recommendations around those two pieces of property that would be coming to council in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. Director Upton can begin.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Great question. To your point, I've done a little bit of windshield analysis based upon rules of thumb, density, land yield analysis, and those sorts of things. As the mayor indicated, we have a really fantastic opportunity, not only to acquire 24 acres of land, but to have basically a first right of refusal on an additional 51 acres of land. I mean, that's, that additional first right of refusal is worth a considerable sum of money outside of the purchase of the acreage that we're talking about. But to answer your question, with respect to the forest site, which is the one that has the most redevelopment potential, it's conceivable that the land yield of about 6.5 acres that could be developable for single-family residential in this market could yield an additional $6+ million of investment in new housing. We're talking new housing that's probably between $350,000, $400,000. So you're talking families that have to make upwards of $130,000 a year to live there, which means annually, if all those houses get sold, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 in new income taxes by having new residents move into the community. And you start thinking about that over time, the transaction, it's really easy to sit here and say, the properties don't appraise for $4 million, why are we spending $4 million? But our charge is to take the long view, and over the long term, I think it's a no-brainer that we're going to be able to best position these properties for redevelopment. Select a developer, like the mayor said, that will respect the surrounding communities and put together a compelling development plan. As you guys know, in real estate, site control is king. If you control outcomes, or you control the site, you can control outcomes. You can control how something looks, how it presents, and how it gets developed. And that is the additional considerations with respect to this particular transaction. So not to mention the fact that we're looking probably low-end reselling the land, just the dirt, between $400,000 and $750,000, $800,000 based upon how much land is selling for right now, residential land for redevelopment. So when you factor that, plus the $6+ million in real estate to build new housing, the income taxes generated by the folks that would live in that housing, it all starts to add up pretty quickly. Where as we are charged as an administration with taking a long view, this makes a lot of sense to us. That is not even considering the additional option on that 51 acres of land, or that first right of refusal. That does, as Mr. Guerreau can attest to, it does have a monetary value to have that much developable acreage, basically with a ROFR is worth something quite a bit, I would argue.
And do you have any other comments around the Spruce property, or would that be sort of a similar approach, or is there other potential projects that we have?
I think that property is more, we're definitely looking at infrastructure and recreational assets and kind of that sort of thing. But I do want to go back and reemphasize what the mayor said around vacant buildings. You can Google a lot of school districts. Brecksville just said that there's a few schools, an elementary school in Elyria that's still standing. All over Northeast Ohio, there's a lot of old school buildings that are still standing because folks haven't come together to create a plan to make it happen. And there's nothing but bad things that happen in vacant buildings. I'm sure the police chief and the fire chief could also attest to what happens in those vacant buildings. Nothing that we want to have happen, especially that these buildings are located in really dense residential neighborhoods. We just don't want that. We don't want that becoming an eyesore, dragging down surrounding property values, all those sorts of things that come with vacant buildings.
And as part of this transfer, we'd be taking on responsibility for any demolition related to the facility?
Correct.
Do we have any idea what that magnitude of that looks like?
Yes, so the superintendent is here, and he shared some information with us. The forest demolition, 241,292. The spruce demolition, 212,250. And in bringing up the superintendent, I just want to reiterate, kind of looking at that long view, that big picture. It's our understanding that if this were to go forward, this could provide the resources that the schools need to finish their acquisition of sites around the existing Birch Elementary School, where regardless if they build a new school or not, their desire to have that access on Lorraine Road to take some of the traffic off of the streets in the rear of the school is I think is a good thing, that they are able to hopefully facilitate that with this, which is all kind of around the edges of this transaction as well. And Mr. Brand could speak more to that if that be the committee's pleasure as
All
well.
right, thank you. Madam Mayor, I don't see anybody from engineering here, but do we find ourselves having to do more maintenance on those neighborhood properties around Birch from the traffic that currently takes place, or do we expect a higher rate based on if that property weren't to be acquired and that ended up with a higher volume due to a past school?
Are you talking about the traffic that would then come onto Lorraine Road?
I'm more wondering about the cost, so I'm looking for overall value add of the purchase, right? Because we've already established that the appraisal value is less than the purchase price, right? And we're factoring in some of the gain that we'll have from these different opportunities, and I'm just wondering, would we also see some cost benefit, given what they're communicating as far as moving out to Lorraine Road? Would we expect the lower maintenance cost on that development and those properties, given the reduced traffic from busing, et cetera? And is Lorraine Road better equipped to handle that versus the residential streets?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, it is definitely, obviously, Lorraine Road is 100% more equipped to handle that than our residential side streets. But in addition to that, when you talk about some of the strain that some of those properties that the school district is looking to obtain over in the Birch area, that puts on our city safety forces and that type of thing as well. Those are all value add, right? As you say, when we're looking at working with the schools for them to achieve their overall goal.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. Any questions from committee?
You took mine.
Oh, any questions from Mr. Kelly had his hand, and then Ms. Heeman, go ahead.
So, Mr. Limpert asked some of the questions I had, but I'm trying to figure out what you're telling us. So, $4 million is an arbitrary number based on speculation of a profit in the future. So we're overpaying for property, and then you speculate that it'll be worth, say, 50% more in the future with development. Is that correct?
I wasn't a part of the actual PSA negotiations. Mr. Garreau spoke to that with opposing counsel. I can't comment on that.
Okay, then throw in another $500,000
Mr. Garreau, can you comment?
almost.
No, I mean, this was a proposal that was made in discussions with the school board to provide not only for the city itself, but also to provide to the school board. Yes, it's more than the appraised value, and there is some additional. I think the one thing we haven't talked about here that hasn't come up, the mayor touched on it, is that the properties to be removed through the ability through the city's acquisition and payment for these properties. It's expected that there'll be some effort made by the district to expand its campus and to remove a property that is probably the #1 crime location in the city of North Olmsted. There are other cities like Fairview Park that just go buy those buildings and tear them down themselves. We've seen that with the Cleveland Motel. You remember that one? And we've seen it with other facilities where Fairview Park had undertaken a means of directly going to acquire those properties. We're not doing that, but a derivative benefit to that, in addition to receiving the properties and the options to purchase the future properties, I think I'm speaking out of turn here, is to eliminate probably the number one blighting influence in the city of North Olmsted right now. We know that motel is, and I can't speak to it, but I know that the safety director, if the mayor wishes to go there, has statistics that are alarming, to say the least. Our police and our fire services are overextended with this particular piece of property. There's a lot of value in that. Can I put a dollar value on it to eliminate that and the effects that it has? Our police, our fire services, go talk to Drug Mart and the people and what's happening over there in the neighborhood around it. There's a value to that. I suppose if the combination of those factors, if the city council sees value in it, then we should roll with this and move forward on it if you see the value in it. The price to be paid, as negotiated and discussed in a conference, is higher than the actual current value of the property. We understand that, and it was understood when we came to you. It was a discussion that was had. We see value in it, and we see value in it in multiple different directions. As somebody once said, when they bought Springvale, they're not making land. They're not making land anymore in North Olmsted, so it creates opportunities. And I think that was kind of the thought that the administration had.
Ms. Heeman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you don't mind, this is a question for the law director. Director Groh, is there a statutory chain requirement when a school building is sold as school property? Like, does it have to be offered, in certain order to certain types of entities? And that if we weren't
yeah.
first in line, we would?
Yeah, it is, there is that particular provision, and a determination by council for the school district was that the first offer was not a requirement here in North Olmsted under these circumstances. So that was the assessment that they had done. Typically, does it have to be offered first to a charter school or things like that? And that's incumbent upon the school district to determine if they're following the law there versus us on that aspect of it. And my recollection is that there was a determination that was based upon the type of charter school in North Olmsted, that was not going to be necessary here, so that we would be able to be first in line to make that determination.
A follow-up, please?
Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Heeman.
So if we don't, sort of become the owner of this, it could next then have to go into consideration as a charter school that would be directly in one of our neighborhoods?
I think, Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Go ahead.
I don't know that it has to be offered to a
Okay.
charter school, but certainly the district would have to find a way to move that property.
Sure.
There's
Thank-
carrying costs, there's maintenance costs, there's security costs, things like that, which the longer it sits there, the district is gonna have to pay for it. And in a situation when they really don't have, I think, an excess of revenue and funds available to carry these types of things based upon their current financial conditions. So I think the North Olmsted administration is in a position to be able to try to assist in that regard. So.
Yeah, and I agree. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Broussard, you had a question?
I do, thank you. Just a couple of observations. The current real estate market that we've been in for, over 2 years now is one where people are paying over appraised value and/or asking price. So that's just the world we live in today. I wanted to circle back, though, to value add. When we talk about potentially acquiring these properties, one of the biggest issues as a 13-plus year council member has been flooding. And so, it's not that the school board has been insensitive to that. It's just that it's not their job to control flooding from school-controlled properties. So now, if we acquire these properties, we have the means to continue our flood mitigation efforts. And, the small sampling that we currently have with schools has been very successful. So I would look forward to that aspect if we do move forward with this plan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One more, any other questions from council? Ms. Gilchrist, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did have a question. If we acquire these properties, will our police and fire be allowed to use them for training purposes before they're demolished?
Mr. Chairman, to the councilwoman, the short answer is yes. they will be made available for our safety forces to do exercise and training activities.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I don't know if your administration can answer this. I do see some school board representatives here, and they're welcome to answer if they know or willing to divulge. But what are the costs that would incur for the schools related to those properties if they were left unpurchased and unused? Do we have any idea what the cost of that is? And I don't know if we don't, that Mr. Upton, I don't know if you have an idea from studies or just in general of unused buildings of what those costs might be.
I don't. It would be impossible to postulate unless they know what their operating expenses are. There's also the opportunity cost of not following through on what Director Garreau had spoken about with respect to acquisition, demolition of underutilized retail and a hotel that's, I think it's had 600, 700 call-outs in the last 3 years, two
Yeah.
ODs in the last month. I mean,
Yeah, Mr. Upton, I guess my question more was around the school's obligation for those properties, and as a resident, you know, you're trying to align the cost of the property of this dollars going from, and I view it as a transfer cost, right? Essentially, you're transferring, if the city of North Olmsted was a holding company, you have two different budgets, two different organizations that you are funding. What is the obligation that then goes to the school to maintain those properties, whether it be from an insurance cost, because it's still property you own, liability or maintenance? I would think there'd have to be some sort of maintenance just because you closed it, you still own the property. I would be interested in that if that's something that the school board would have available or have an idea of what that might cost, because to me as a council person, I would like to factor that in from a benefit perspective. And I get it, you know, there's two ways to look at this. You're either completely against this because you feel that why is the city paying money to the school, or you're looking at it from a holistic perspective of what makes our city better, and we have two organizations that as a resident we pay taxes to, and how is this the most effective way to manage our city and to provide the resources to make this city better. So I'd be interested in what that cost is, because for me that would be a factor in my decision.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, I don't know that the superintendent is prepared to speak at this meeting, but I know that they've done that analysis. So please go. Superintendent, please.
Well, not to, Mr. Brand, go ahead, please. It's my meeting.
Old habits die hard.
Yes.
It's only been 6 months, Dwayne.
I do not have the hard numbers to give to you tonight. I can get them to you. A couple points of that. We would have to hire a security firm to monitor those facilities. So you would have that cost. You would have our maintenance cost of upkeep as far as just simply the land itself. Obviously, simple things, mowing, et cetera, probably would cost us to hire, because we have reduced our maintenance team as part of our $3 million in reduction. So we would have to hire on additional staff to do that we don't currently have. But as if going through the progression that you asked, the law director, it is municipality first, and if the school district and municipality can't come to agreement, we would go to auction. And then at that point, the highest bidders, we lose control, everybody loses control of what goes on onto those sites. So we would be looking to offload those sites as quickly as possible, because we don't have the funds to hire a security firm to make sure those facilities are secure and are walked through every day, as well as the land being simply taken care of, as well as decommissioning boilers and other pieces of equipment there, along with ensuring the insurance costs that would go up for a vacant building. That's a completely different, obviously a different insurance premium. I could get those dollar values to you, but I do not have those in front of me today.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Is that something that can be turned around fairly quickly? Because I know there's a desire to try to move forward with this and,
I will do my best.
Okay.
I'm at the mercy of the insurance company and some things of that nature,
Sure.
right?
And I'm not looking
And due to
for-
the holiday, could be a little more challenging.
That's fine.
Than other times, but I believe I can get this turned around pretty quickly.
That's great, and again, I'm looking for estimates here, not, full appraisal feedback, right, from the insurance company, but just whether there's things like, I think there was a Fairview Elementary School a couple of years ago, granted, that was several years ago, but they went under something similar, and the city purchased their property, so, they may have something similar, what they had to do. If it's difficult to get that responsiveness. Again, I'm just trying to get an understanding of what that overall picture of value looks, because I haven't seen sort of a full estimate of cost of value, which I think is important for us before we decide on how we want to proceed with that money. I understand time is important here. So, Ms. Heeman, you have a question? Go ahead.
Are you finished?
I was just gonna go for next steps here, because I'm over my time, and I wanted to be considerate of the environmental meeting. But go ahead if you have something quick.
Thank you. A little bit more of a comment. I think we can't discount the value of being able to tell the residents that live in those neighborhoods that we will help control what goes into their neighborhood. It's not like a Murray Hill School building that just sits in the middle of like a regular retail sort of space where there's a yoga studio, there's an art gallery, there's some office buildings. This is actually, contained, these schools are within neighborhoods. It's not even like the Birch School that's on Butternut that is just sort of off of a semi-main thoroughfare. So I think that there's a lot of value to that, and I hope that you will consider that when you're working on your financial equation, because to not have control what's going to be next door to our residents is really, I think, a disservice to them. Thank you.
Okay, so my recommendation is that we hold this in committee. I can get the things pulled together from what we've talked about here of getting some numbers around what we're talked about here, right? There's clearly, these are all soft value items with some tangible, such as potential housing, which again, I understand that may not be the final direction, but to show the value add. I'd like to get something together, and Ms. Coffer, is that something that the two of you can come together to give us sort of a soft idea of what we're talking about of being tangible values, and what are some of these other things that were listed? I
think future values and things like that aren't really my area of expertise. I can do numbers, I can do financing, I can, we can pull together safety data or whatever, but, I don't know real estate,
Okay.
so I'm sorry.
Mr. Upton, is that?
Yeah, that's something I can certainly work to put together and get that to you.
Okay. So go ahead. Ms.
I just
Williamson.
have perhaps maybe a comment or a request that we can try to, regardless of what transpires with the property, if we do in fact purchase it, that we can try to preserve whatever tree canopies that we have in the development process and not take down some of the more mature trees that we have.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is plan to schedule, and I know we can do this in caucus, but I'd like to schedule another meeting this week to see if we can get what we have turned around. And is that a reasonable request, Madam Mayor? Does that align with the timeline if we try to meet again this week?
Mr. Chairman, so the next special council meeting is Thursday.
Correct.
We can do our best to get that information to you prior to that.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
It's my understanding, though, that it's on second reading tonight.
Yep.
So if you're holding it at committee, it can't be on second reading.
Right.
And then it can't be on third reading, and property, Mr. Grow has to go 3 readings.
Right.
And 30
Yeah,
days.
I understand we may need to do
Okay,
another.
I just,
And I mean, I'll leave that to the council president, but I understand we might need another meeting to get this approved in that case, but this is a lot to get presented. And I think we all have talked about this before, the administration has been transparent about this, but only recently did we get the cost versus value. So I just want to have something in front that we can gauge long-term and sort of strategize to related to the acquisition.
We can prepare a white paper on it.
Oh, we don't, but we have an environmental meeting. Okay. Oh. Why don't we have a caucus?
Because it's a special
We need to
council.
schedule one.
Oh. Well, do we have to, can we still do that through notification?
We have to, we can have a committee meeting,
Yeah.
Andrew,
Mhm.
whatever, and then, we'll have to call the next special council meetings on Thursday.
So that needs how many hours or how many days?
We have 48 for that one.
48.
I mean, we're not gonna do it on Friday, are we?
Right. Well, it's a quick meeting anyway. That's up to the council president's pleasure to figure out what.
Well, it's your committee, Councilman.
No, it's my
so-
committee. I meant for the council meeting. I make a motion to hold this in committee and ask for a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And I'll conclude the Finance Committee at 7:41 PM.
I'd now like to call the Environmental Control Committee meeting on July 5th, 2022 at 7:42. Present are committee members Scarl, Gilchrist, and Kelly. Council members President Broussard, Glassburn, Heeman, Limpert, and Williams. The mayor, law director, finance director, HR director, economic director, safety director, and service director, and guests. On the agenda tonight is Resolution 2022-61, which is a resolution authorizing the Director of Public Service to advertise for bids to award a contract for construction services at the wastewater treatment plant, parentheses, WWTP, parentheses, as detailed in the specifications on file with the engineer, and further authorizing the mayor, following approval of the Board of Control, to contract for the same with the lowest and best bidder and declaring emergency. Madam Mayor, who would you like to speak on this?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our Service Director Carney and our wastewater treatment plant Superintendent Blum are here tonight to speak on this.
Thank you. Mr. Carney, would you like to go first,
Mr.
please?
Chairman, first, I'd like to amend the resolution to take off declaring an emergency. Just have it as a regular second reading.
Okay. So, taking off emergency, it's going to be on second reading only tonight?
Right, please. And Superintendent Blum's been in charge of at the water plant for years, and he was on board. This plan's been going on effect for more than, since COVID. So I'm going to have him answer all the heavy-duty questions, and, because he's been in it from day one, from the previous administration. If you don't
Thank you,
mind.
Director. Mr. Bloom, please.
Thank you, council members. Basically, as the ordinance says, we are really looking for permission to go out to bid. This money was budgeted at the beginning of the year. We set aside $180,000 to make improvements to the Zimpro area, which is currently a vacant area of the treatment plant. It's by design, very thin-walled area with some panels that can potentially be removed or blow out. if the Zimpro unit overpressured. So we're losing a lot of heat, a lot of cooling to the outside atmosphere through these thin-walled panels. They're also made out of metal and they're decaying, so we need to do something. And we thought that utilizing this space for a conference room, a training room, and a crew break room was the best fit for the wastewater treatment plant, as we are currently split up in various areas around the treatment plant, and we're looking to create a little bit more synergy between the 5 work groups that work out of the treatment plant. With that, I'll take questions from council.
Okay, I have a question for you first. I believe this construction would have been done in 2008 when the $40 million plant was done, but due to budget constraints, something had to be cut, and this was cut.
Right, so we made 3 major cuts to the treatment plant in order to fit under the existing budget at that time. We took out renovations to the lab, which have since been completed. We took out at the time renovations to the maintenance department, which has since been completed. And we took out a crew break room and remodel to the bathrooms. We're asking now to take care of that crew room, that training room, and then we'll handle more than likely the renovations to the bathrooms in-house, because that's something that we have the capability to do
Okay.
in-house.
So you've done without this training room and break room for 14 years, pretty much? So?
Correct.
And now there's money budgeted this year to have that project done, and I believe it's, according to the prints that I looked at, it's like $223,000, something like that?
We originally budgeted slightly less than that, but
Okay.
we're anticipating a bid of around $200,000.
Okay, yeah, I saw like 195, and maybe it might be
Correct.
200 now?
Yes.
Okay, or 220. Okay, when do you anticipate this to get started with?
Since the money's encumbered this year, we hope to have the bids in by the end of the fall and have a contract in place at that time. And then construction would start depending on when the contractors are available, either this winter or in the spring.
Okay, do you know the duration offhand, roughly what they figured?
Based on previous experience with contractors, I would estimate this to last less than a year. I would say approximately 6 months. Most of the demolition has been already completed in-house through small projects or through the use of our own maintenance department. So we have a pretty clean slate to go off of. I think about 6 to 9 months would be appropriate for the construction.
Okay, thank you. One more question. Do you plan on using any of our personnel for the new construction? I know they've done demo and things like that, other than the bathrooms you just talked
Right.
about.
Where we can, we will, but for the most part, our guys are dedicated towards other maintenance tasks right now. I would prefer not to utilize them, but if we need to get involved, we can, and we can certainly direct the contractor and oversee the contractor as appropriate.
Thank you. That's all I have at this point. Any questions from committee? How about from council? Councilwoman Heeman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did go and visit the wastewater treatment plant to look at this project, and actually, the room is really kind of ready for, for the contractors. It's very cleaned out. They did a great job at the demolition. And I did see the types of areas that they want to put in counters and, cabinet storage and things like that. The lowering the ceiling, makes everything much more efficient for the heating and cooling. So it really, I think, is a good project, and I was pretty impressed with, the level that our guys have taken it to as a demolition and prep for the work to be done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman.
Any other questions from council? Seeing no further questions, I move to recommend Resolution 2022-61 as amended to all of council and ask for a second.
I second.
Motion made by Councilman Scarl, second by Councilwoman Gilchrist. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That motion passes 3-0 with no other items on the agenda for the Environmental Control Committee meeting. That will conclude at 7:48. Thank you.
He was laughing.
The special council meeting of July 5th, 2022 will now please come to order. The audience is invited to join council in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance.
Flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Broussard.
Present.
Ms. Gilchrist. Here. Mr. Glassberg.
Here.
Ms. Seaman. Here. Mr. Kelly.
Here.
Mr. Limpert.
Present.
Mr. Scarl.
Present.
Ms. Williamson. Here.
Moving into council committee reports, Councilwoman Williamson, Chairwoman of the Public Safety, Health, and Welfare Committee. Do you have a report this evening?
No, I do not. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilman Limpert, Chairman of the Building, Zoning, and Development Committee. Do you have a report?
No report this evening, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Limpert, Vice Chair of the Finance Committee. Do you have a report this evening?
No report this evening, but I will be providing mine at the next meeting.
Thank you. Councilwoman Heeman, Chairwoman of the Recreation, Public Parks, and Buildings Committee. Do you have a report?
I do not. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilman Kelly, Chairman of the Streets and Transportation Committee. Do you have a report?
No report tonight, thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Scarl, Chairman of the Environmental Control Committee. Do you have a report this evening?
Thank you, Mr. President. I do have a report. The Environmental Control Committee met this evening, 7:42 p.m. Present were committee members Scarl, Gilchrist, Kelly, and all of council, the rest of council, the mayor, law director, finance director, HR director, economic director, safety director, service director, and guests. On the agenda was Resolution 2022-61, which is a resolution authorizing the Director of Public Service to advertise for bids to award a contract for construction services at the wastewater treatment plant, as detailed in the specifications on file with the engineer, and further authorizing the mayor, following approval of the Board of Control, to contract for the same and lowest and best bidder. After a discussion of the work that was to be done, it's building a training room and a break room for employees. It's been 14 years in waiting to get done. Money's been appropriated in the budget for this year, and we're going to utilize the vacant space that was demoed out. The committee voted 3-0 to recommend Resolution 2022-61 as amended to all of council. The meeting concluded at 7:48 p.m. Mr. President, at this time, I move to amend 2022-61 to remove the emergency clause and ask for a second.
Second.
Motion to amend 2022-61 made by Councilman Scarl and seconded by Councilwoman Gilchrist. Roll call, please.
Mr. Kelly.
Yes.
Ms. Gilchrist.
Yes.
Mr. Glassberg.
Yes.
Ms. Heeman.
Yes.
Mr. Limpert.
Yes.
Ms. Williamson.
Yes.
Mr. Scarl.
Yes.
Motion to amend 2022-61 passes by a vote of 7-0.
Mr. President, that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilwoman Gilchrist, Chairwoman of the Intergovernmental Relations Committee, do you have a report this evening?
I do not, Mr. President, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any letters or communications to come before council at this time?
Yes, Mr. President. Council received 17 positive letters of recommendation from police chiefs, fire chiefs, and one mayor of cities that have successfully moved their dispatch centers to Chagrin Valley Dispatch.
Thank you. We will now move into audience participation. Thank you for attending tonight's council meeting. Public comments offer the opportunity for members of the public to share information and bring issues and concerns to the attention of city council members. It is not a debate, and public comment speakers should not expect a back-and-forth exchange. Council members may ask clarifying questions of the speaker, city staff, or fellow council members. Those attending city council meetings should show the same respect to others that they wish to have shown to them. If there is anyone in the audience who would like to address council, please come to the podium, state and spell your name and address for the clerk. If you live in a city other than North Olmsted, please state the name of that city and proceed with your comments. You will have up to 3 minutes.
My name is Debbie Bors. I'm on behalf of my dad, Jack Boss, who's been an 85-year-old resident for 85 years. He lives at 31084 Lorraine Road. I live at 13990 Cowley Road in Columbia Station. My parents, Jack and Jacqueline, were members of the community for 85 years. They were both born here, raised here, worked here, and contributed to a numerous amounts of city and school venues for over 65 years. I was born here. I was a citizen for 29 years. I am presently working as a teacher at Pine, Maple, and the high school for the last 22 years. A couple of months ago, I was driving to Pine. About 3 unmarked cars sped by me. I saw in Starbucks a police car window shot out, got out of my car in the parking lot at Pine, and heard about 15 shots. Our secretary yelled at me to get in the building. The dispatcher from the police department had declared us in a lockdown. A Pine teacher was talking to that dispatcher that was familiar with Pine, told us what was going on, where to be in the building, the street that they were pursuing, and cornering the shooter in. Finally, when it was safe to come out, she let us know that. Later that same day, Pine was in another lockdown. Again, I guess a person was walking around outside with a gun. In both incidences, the dispatcher was very calming and informative to us, and a coordinator for the police and school administration during those times. Why I'm sharing my thoughts with you? 13 years ago, I lost my 22-year-old son. He was running. They found him on someone's tree lawn, feet crossed like he was catching his breath. The coroner never found anything wrong with him and put natural causes on his death certificate. We never saw it coming, and we couldn't do anything about it. The mass shooting in Texas, horrific. The death of the children, heartbreaking for all of us. But I cried for the parents, because the tragedy of their new normal life, there was nothing will be the same for them, and it's becoming evident that there was some kind of miscommunication between their safety departments. Please remember, every parent's nightmare is burying your own child. Do you really believe that in a million years, a mass shooting will not happen here? Or can you recognize the need for a proactive plan just in case and put your own North Olmsted safety personnel in the best and familiar positions so they can save lives? That way, you can plan for when it's coming, and you can actually do something about it. Thank you.
Pardon the interruption, ma'am. Before you start, I just want to remind any current or retired safety forces personnel who wish to speak this evening, you're not required to give us your address. Thank you.
Hi, council members and Mayor Daley. My name is Mary Kate Kelly. I live on Canterbury Road in North Olmsted. I've been a resident in that home for 23 years now. I'm a registered nurse with 35 years of community experience, and I'd like to speak regarding the 2022-55 emergency dispatch with Chagrin Valley Dispatch. I'm aware of the extreme competency of our staff of dispatch and working with the police department, the fire department, and the EMS. As a master's prepared nurse practitioner working in the community, I have experienced the poor response times in communities and the devastating effects to the individuals in the greater Cleveland area. In my experience, our current dispatch team, they're very competent, knowledgeable about our community, its activities. Additionally, I feel like they know me and I know them. I strongly feel by outsourcing this service away from our local control, we're going to experience significantly increased response times, added cost, and poorer outcomes for our community. The response times directly impact the positive outcome of our health and the safety of our residents, especially the door-to-medicine time of a stroke victim. We have a 90-minute window to get a clotbuster on board to prevent the long-term effects of a stroke. I feel very strongly that by outsourcing this, we will suffer this, and we have a lot of elderly people in this community. In looking at page 2 of the CVD participation agreement, I would like to know what is the annual budget for the police and fire that we can compare these numbers to. Because the way I figured it, the cost of this is going to be $702,881. The monthly amount, the second year would be $822,732. And I'd like to know what that compares with the salaries that we're paying the emergency staff. In my ending statement, I request that council members reject this resolution 2022-55 for ongoing safety, health, and well-being of the community. Thank you.
Tammy Ferris, I'm a Westlake resident. As the union representative for the dispatchers, I'm very protective of my group. I wasn't even planning to speak tonight, but there's been a few things that were said over the last few weeks that have really upset my group. So I'm just here to address them and comment on them and hopefully set the record straight. It shouldn't take me long. For a long time, the police chief and Sergeant Fiorito have been telling us that everybody's being forced to regionalize, or we would lose our county funding for the 911 system. Now we all know that that isn't true. We learned that information directly from the county, that the legislation everybody's been quoting never even applied to us. It applied to wireless PSAPs only. We tried to explain that to everyone a few meetings ago, and it seems as if it fell on deaf ears. So we asked that the 911 coordinators for the county be invited to speak at our last meeting so they could explain in detail to everyone and council could make an informed decision. There is no penalty. There is no cutting of funding if we don't regionalize. But their supervisor got a phone call the morning of that meeting asking them not to show. They weren't welcome to speak at our meeting. Isn't that interesting? I could say a lot about that, but I'm just going to move on with my next topic. A few weeks ago, the chiefs made a video, a social media video, listing all the qualifications and certifications of Chagrin Valley Dispatch. The fire chief even made it a point to mention how efficient they are because they have police and fire dispatching in the same room. And if the police dispatcher needs the fire department, they could just turn to their partner and dispatch them at the same time. That's literally what North Olmsted Dispatch has been doing since 1994, when police and fire dispatch came together. And for the record, we have the same certifications that Chagrin Valley Dispatch does. They didn't mention that during their show. My final point is all the technology and equipment and IT support that's so much better than ours. That's all we've been hearing from Sergeant Fiorito. Whose fault is that? When the fire department needs equipment, they budget for it and they get it. Same with the police department. Dispatch has a budget. If all that equipment and technology was so important, why didn't anybody ever bother to budget for it for us, for their own city? It must not have been that important. That's a direct reflection on the people who maintain and manage the dispatch center, not on the people who work there. Yet who's going to suffer? 15 of some of the hardest working people in this city. 15 dispatchers, some of whom have over 30 years' experience just in the city of North Olmsted. That's who's going to suffer by losing their seniority and their benefits and their union protection. Anybody who's in agreement with selling out loyal employees for technology ought to be ashamed of themselves. In closing, I'm just going to say this. We might not have the technology and equipment and bells and whistles that Chagrin Valley has. And God knows that we are not perfect, and we'll be the first to admit it. But no North Olmsted dispatcher's ever gotten anybody hurt or killed. No North Olmsted dispatcher's ever gotten the city sued. And no North Olmsted dispatcher's ever put the public or the police officers or firemen in harm's way. And we didn't need fancy equipment and technology to do it. We had experience and skill and detailed knowledge of our city, and most importantly, we know and care about the first responders that we are keeping safe. That is what makes a good dispatch center, not bells and whistles. And if this vote goes through, you're all going to learn that lesson very quickly. I just hope and pray it's not at the expense of somebody's safety or death. Thank you.
Before we move on, if I could just remind everyone, it looks like we're going to have a lot of speakers tonight, and I respect that. So let's please try to stay within that 3-minute time limit. Thank you.
Okay, good evening. My name is Bridget Rhoda, and I live in Fairview Park. I've been a dispatcher for 22 years for another West Shore city. My words are my own and do not represent my department in any way. Many times throughout these mergers, I have heard administrators speak about ORC 128.571, stating they are being forced to regionalize due to this Ohio Revised Code. I am here with email confirmation from Mr. Rob Jackson, the Ohio 911 administrator, as well as Mrs. Nancy Colcan, the Cuyahoga County coordinator, that clearly states ORC 128.571 only pertains to wireless public safety answering points, or PSAP. There is only one wireless PSAP in Cuyahoga County, and that is the Cuyahoga Emergency Communication System, or what most refer to as CCOMS. CCOMS receives all wireless 911 calls and transfers those calls to the appropriate PSAP where the emergency is happening. No municipality is currently being fined or losing any funding for not joining a regionalized center. Even if the county does decide after 2023 to start charging people for their phone lines, the fee is capped at $4,200 a year. I truly hope you aren't doing all this over $4,200 a year. It's also important to note that there is a House Bill 445, that is currently going through legislation. This House bill will repeal ORC 128.571 and create funding for the state EZNet. The EZNet and its technology will allow wireless emergency calls to route directly to each individual PSAP instead of being routed through CCOMS. It will be the most advanced 911 technology that all of us will receive, regionalized or not. It will also open opportunities for PSAPs to receive funding from the state with no limit on how many PSAP can receive the funding. Just think about how much money a center with 20-plus cities could possibly receive. That would be a great reason to acquire more cities, something to think about. Lastly, I heard at one of the last meetings, someone from the administration talk about the need for radio upgrades. I see from your estimates that you projected the cost of the radios and other equipment at around $440,000. I also heard these upgrades had been budgeted for, but it was never made clear what happened to that budgeted money. Your buy-in cost plus your annual fees for next year with Chagrin Valley are a bit over $1.2 million. That's not including other fees you will incur. I'm looking forward to the explanation on the cost savings you're anticipating, especially since you'll be sending taxpayer dollars to the east side. I'm not going to stand here and talk about CBD or their high turnover rates, their abundant amount of overtime, their extremely stressful working conditions, or the fact that you are disbanding a union to send your dispatchers into an unprotected non-union job. Instead, I will hope that you've done your due diligence, as Lakewood City Council did, and realize this is not a good idea for a city of over 30,000 residents. After all, only you will have to live with the consequences of your choices. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm not a resident. I live on Lewis Road in the township, not on Lewis in North Olmsted. And I personally don't want dispatch to confuse us and send the wrong people to the wrong place. After all, CBD managed to cause the death of a resident in one case in spite of getting an excellent 911 call by dispatching to the wrong place, at which point they decided...
Pardon me, ma'am, can you just give us your name, please?
My name, I'm sorry, Marty Lesher.
Thank you.
Lewis Road. After they caused the death by dispatching too late to save a heart case, then they said they were going to upgrade their mats. Cleveland Metro Parks disbanded their in-house dispatch about coming up 2 years ago because their police chief thought it was going to be a good idea. The police chief left shortly thereafter. The dispatchers who worked at Metro Parks and knew the Metro Parks were hired by CBD to help them find things in the Metro Parks. Most of them are not there. As was addressed, there is a huge turnover, and they are greatly overworked. They are always hiring. You don't want new people. You want people who are familiar with your area. They can't keep tech people there to repair all the cases they have that go wrong. And they have that extra step of not turning across the room to dispatch. They actually have to take it here, and then it goes to someone else to dispatch it out. You need to look for local, long-term people who know what's going on to decrease the turnover because time is critical. This is law enforcement. And I hope that you will look beyond the promised things which were promised there and have not come out. You need to consolidate, do it with other West Side communities who are also familiar with what you need to do, and use people who are experienced and dedicated to do it. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Danielle Chafin. I am a resident of Strongsville, but today I'm here as an attorney for the Ohio Patrolmen's Benevolent Association, the union that represents the dispatchers.
Danielle, if you're not safety, police or fire, please state your address.
Sure.
Thank you.
17892 Treasure Isle Circle,
Thank you.
Strongsville, Ohio. Okay. Kathy Mulgrew, Beth Vance, Bob Gantner, Mark Madden, Tammy Ferris, Nicole Zuck, Savannah Utlak, Cassidy Boyle, Emily Patterson, Lauren Bascone, Lauren Brandow, Becky Woodward, Chrissy Johnson, Claire France, Kendra Adams, and Abigail Keish-Martin. Those are the names of the people whose jobs you are trying to take away. Those are the people who are protected by our union, who you have agreed to enter into a contract with. In that contract, you promise them job security. You promise them just cause protection. You promise them wages, 40 hours a week. And at this point, you are trying to break that promise with them. If these dispatchers were to try to move to Chagrin Valley, on a good day, it's going to take them about an hour to get to work, when right now they might have a 5-10 minute commute. It's not feasible for most of these people to go out to Chagrin Valley to work. At that point, they're also losing seniority. You have employees with 20 to 30 years here who are at the top of seniority list, first choice when it comes to shift bidding, first choice when it comes to vacation. They're going to lose all of that. It's not just about money, it's about the other benefits that come along with being in a union and being a long-term employee. By moving dispatch out to Chagrin Valley, you're saying you don't care about those 15 names that I read, that they are not important to you, and the people that are sitting in this room, because I imagine it's not normally this packed, that they don't matter, because they're here to also speak about this. Have you thought about how loss of control over the operations is going to affect you? What happens if a dispatcher sends a police officer to the wrong location? Do you have any authority to discipline that officer, that dispatcher? Do you have the authority to set policies on how operations will work? Because it's my understanding that you will be one member of a very large group of people who will have a say in how that Chagrin Valley Dispatch Center operates. You're going to lose control over the operations. It's going to affect your police and fire. Knowledge of the area is something that's been mentioned. What happens if I call 911 from a park and I say I'm at a park on Lorraine Road? Is that dispatcher on the east side of Cleveland who's never been to North Olmsted going to know which park I'm talking about? Or will the people standing behind me know which park I'm talking about? Who's going to get a police officer there or an ambulance there faster if my kid's choking and seconds matter?
Danielle, pardon the interruption, but you're beyond.
Sure. The last thing I want to ask you is, before you decided to ship our jobs to another city, did you go in there and actually ask them what they do for a day? Did you stand there and see how their job operates? Did you say, tell me what you do, tell me why your job is so important? Because my guess is most of you did not do that before you decided to ship jobs off. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Paula Ty. I live in North Ridgeville. I work for a police department, but not this one. I've been a dispatcher for 32 years. I've gone through going to regional and then coming back. I'm gonna keep this short. Dispatchers are a vital link between the public and the first responders. We currently have an emergency level shortage of dispatchers. And it's no wonder. With this current trend of regionalization, we're bailing. We're leaving, even if we get hired at the center that we are shipped to, we're bailing. You know why? It's stressful. The phones ring constantly. There is no break. It's loud in there. Yeah, there's people yelling across the room, but they're not helping you with calls. You don't know what desk you're going to be on until you get to work. You might be promised that you're going to work the North Olmsted desk, but when you walk in, you're going to be somewhere else where you don't know. Many people have talked about the locations and the familiarity. That's huge, because with all those cities, it's very hard to try and figure out what the caller is talking about. There's so much to learn. You're taking calls from other cities while you're also trying to tend to your officers, answering their radio traffic, monitor them on their calls. I could be taking a call for another city at the same time. You do your best to get all the pertinent information quickly so you can drop the call, but not everyone is successful at getting all the information. And by drop the call, I mean you have to type it out, put it in a CAD, and it drops down to the person whose city it goes to. Not everyone is successful at getting all the information that you dropped. Sometimes there's not a callback number so you can get all the pertinent information. So you're stuck with a call, giving it out, as important as it might be or as petty as it might be. You don't have all the information. And guess who gets upset at you? Your officers, because they think that you weren't doing your job, when if, in effect, it was somebody across the room that wasn't doing their job. This is unsafe. And now that I've just barely covered the stress and pandemonium that you deal with, the side effects of stress on your body, which is burnout, also manifests as sickness. So yes, I'm speaking of call-offs. There's nothing worse than being ordered to stay after a long, hectic day, being ordered in on your day off, or being denied vacations or comp time because there is no coverage. I'm assuming that's why in a certain dispatch center there were 13 resignations last month. And I'm assuming that is also why in a single center dispatch agency, there's a waiting list for full-time dispatchers, all of them coming from a regional center. North Olmsted has many businesses which you're very fortunate to have, but will you be able to keep them when your dispatch times and your response times double or triple? This brings to mind a certain gas station robbery that was dropped for me when I was in a regional center. This isn't the same regional center you're speaking of going to. This only had 5 cities. This robbery was in progress when the phone was answered. By the time I got the call, the robber was long gone. When I was speaking to one of my officers afterward, lamenting about the situation, his response was, "Paula, we've given up on being able to catch the bad guys now. Since we've been at regional, we just go and take the reports. It's all we can do." Keep that in mind, chiefs. Speaking of chiefs, someone else commented on how you are not in charge anymore. If there's 13 other agencies, you're one of 26. Your vote really doesn't matter. So you really won't have any say-so on what happens. Have I reached my 3 minutes? Because I have a lot, but I'll stop.
I apologize, you're well past it.
Okay, I'm gonna stop.
Mr. President.
I have more, but
I'd like
I'll
to
stop.
give her an extra moment.
If there's a motion on the floor by a council member to extend her time by 2 minutes.
So moved.
Okay. All right. We'll extend the time by 2 minutes. Will that be enough for you?
Sorry, I'm kind of nervous. I'm used to talking on the radio, not to people. Our city that I worked for had determined that when they were taking back our dispatch center, that we would go back to our home city. We took the hard way. Other cities took the lazy way, I call it, and they went to a regional center, which is Chagrin Valley. Our administration worked hard and got our dispatch center back in order for us. And I will say that the mayor at that time, who is the mayor who sent us away and also the mayor who brought us back, he said the whole time we were gone, he received nothing but complaints about dispatch. And he said that as soon as we came back, the complaints stopped. So that's something else to think about. Okay, I'm done.
Good evening. My name's Calvin Holliday. I'm the first vice president of the Western Cuyahoga County Fraternal Order Police. I was a police officer for 39 years and I worked plenty of dispatch myself. I only have 2 points to make. One, the relocation of dispatch will impact the safety of law enforcement and the citizens of this city. Two, those of you who are in front of me have requested and received the endorsement of Fraternal Order Police were specifically asked if you support law enforcement. These actions do not support law enforcement. Thank you.
Alejandro Chalk, 24677 Randall Drive in North Olmsted. Of all the things that I've seen happen in the city since I've lived here, never would I have imagined that this council and this administration would ask our dispatchers to be away from their friends and families on July 4th, and then the next day come and debate ending their careers in North Olmsted. That being said, I'm not sure this council legitimately cares what I would have imagined, and I don't think that'll change tonight, so don't take it from me. Take it from our own chief of police, who, when asked for his take on the legislation, said, quote, "Do I love the fact that it's on the east side? I don't. My full intention for years would have been to have it here in North Olmsted. That would still be, if it was feasible, the best choice." Don't take it from me. Take it from your own Public Safety, Health, and Welfare Committee, who voted to not recommend this legislation for approval on June 27th. Don't take it from me. Take it from Lakewood City Council. Lakewood Mayor Megan George was forced to apologize to her dispatchers and law enforcement personnel after their city council discovered her attempts to move Lakewood away from its own dispatch and into Chagrin Valley Dispatch. Just a week ago, at the June 27th meeting of the Lakewood City Council Public Safety Committee, Lakewood City Council President John Litton called the idea of leaving for Chagrin Valley Dispatch, quote, "a non-starter until we're mandated otherwise," reflecting the complete and total lack of any state or county mandate and effectively ending any attempt to move Lakewood to Chagrin Valley Dispatch. This has me wondering why. Why does this administration continue to rush this legislation without even exploring Westcom as an alternative to a dispatch center on the east side? Westcom has clearly demonstrated a willingness to participate in these discussions at our meeting on the 14th, so why hasn't the city explored that at length? We must remember that our dispatchers are the first voice we hear on the worst day of our lives. Ultimately, I pay my taxes because that voice will be ready to help my family or my neighbors at an instant, whether I'm at a fixed address or just at the signal next to the big building by Walmart. Local expertise is critical to the mission of saving lives and protecting public safety. North Olmsted is not a street grid like many east side suburbs. It is a community of connected subdivisions. many of which have only 1 or 2 entry points for several interior roads. Knowing where those entry and exit points are and knowing where common references such as schools, parks, and buildings are in relation to our neighborhood streets is what saves precious seconds when deploying first responders. That cannot be replicated easily, if at all, by people who have never lived on this side of town, let alone have never been to North Olmsted, period. How does it serve seniors, families, and children to risk increasing response times in order to chase some false deadline imposed by none other than the administration itself? How can a nurse, of all people, be the deciding vote on a piece of legislation that might add seconds to the response time that costs someone's life? Lakewood City Council showed this very legislation the door because that was a risk they were not ready to take. They chose to put their dispatchers, their law enforcement professionals, and their community ahead of whatever dark political forces conjured this nightmare. It's time for this City Council and this administration to do the same. Thank you.
My name's Don McKee. I'm a 32-year resident of North Olmsted. I'm not going to throw out a bunch of numbers and facts and figures, but 2 things, or 3 things. One is I've been a union member for over 50 years, and I will stand behind these unions here. Secondly, I believe we have the best fire department and police department and dispatchers of the whole state of Ohio, and I will stand up for these people, fight to the end. Thank you.
My name is Bob Bryseth. I live at 6023 Decker Road. My phone number is 440-759-0484. The reason why I bring that up, I have had 4 attempts to contact my council person, Ms. Gilchrist. I called back in May. I've called in June. I'm waiting for an answer. I called today, and if the phone number I have is correct, it's dead. So, my questions to anybody that would like to contact me, council, mayor, I have just a couple questions I would like to know where I can find the answers to, or somebody could call and let me know. How much money does this save the city of North Olmsted regionalizing to the east side? How much will we have to pay per call that is dispatched? When I started my law enforcement career back in 1989, I worked for a very small suburb on the far east side in Cuyahoga County, and they were paying $5 a call back in 1989. What's the answer to that? How will warrants and all the paperwork be handled between our agency and having to get the paperwork to Chagrin? Is it all going to stay here? How's that? Has that all been worked out? What will the savings that we are saving going to be used for? If there is such a big savings and this is such a rush, where is that money going to be earmarked for? And it's my understanding that the dispatchers that head to Chagrin Valley are all going to be getting a pay raise. If we're saving money, how are they getting pay raises? At what cost? I don't want to see our dispatchers leave. I worked with them for just over 30 years. They've been a fabulous job, saved me when I got hurt, had my back. If this is such a good idea, why aren't we doing it here in North Olmsted? Why are we doing it on the west side? And why are we giving up control? Next question I have is, how are the station calls going to be handled when somebody walks in at 2 o'clock in the morning to report they've been assaulted? Some woman comes in and says she was raped. Somebody says they were carjacked. Who's going to be in the lobby? Are we going to have a phone in the lobby that they're going to pick up that phone? It's going to go to Chagrin Valley Dispatch somewhere else? Who's going to then dispatch us to somebody right in our lobby? Somebody comes in needing help. Who's going to be there to help them? If somebody walks into our dispatch that needs help, our dispatchers are trained. And they have access right then and there to get the help there. They don't have to really call anybody else. They don't have to call another agency. They don't have to send it somewhere else. These are a few of the questions I have answers, or I have questions of and would like answers. Anybody that can point me in the right direction, feel free to call me. I would love to hear and know where I can find these answers. And again, Ms. Gilchrist, sorry to call you out, but I am not happy about that.
Mr. President, can I ask a question?
Please.
What number are you calling?
662-0652?
No, that's the wrong number. My number is 440.
Hold on, please. I apologize, that's why you never called me back.
Yes.
This is what I got off of our public information for the city.
I checked the city website and it's correct.
Okay, so please.
It's 440-662-0651.
Oh. Well, ma'am, I apologize. That's why you couldn't get a hold of me.
Apology accepted.
I wish somebody would have called me back and told me I had the wrong number, though. That's all I have. Thank you for your time.
All right, my name is Christine Strauss. I'm not going to give out my address because I'm still in public safety. I was not going to speak up here today, but there are a lot of really great, amazing people in this room. I used to work for the city of North Olmsted as a dispatcher, and I actually used to work at Chagrin Valley. What I want to tell you, the biggest part about Chagrin Valley is the bells and whistles and everything and the smoke and mirrors of what Chagrin Valley is fantastic and bar none for a dispatch center. But being in there and sitting in there, it is the most stressful, toxic environment you will possibly sit in. I worked out of the Bedford Center, and that's 17 cities. They don't care if you know the city. You can Google it. They don't care if you know the guys or the girls in the street. They don't care if you know their voices. It doesn't really matter. You have a basis of what dispatching is. You're supposed to be able to do that basic part, and you're supposed to utilize all the technology. It gets the job done. Everybody can get in there and they can get it done. It's a fantastic group of people, but they're stressed to the max. It's a 12-hour shift. It's a long 12 hours to sit, stressed out every single shift. You also are going to lose your community aspect. There is no connection with your officers. There is no connection with the fire department, the people. Many times I sit at that desk and you can talk to that regular person that calls in, once or twice a week, give them a couple minutes of your time, talk them down. You can't do that in a center. It's literally a call center. You have to drop one to the next and you have to keep going. There is no empathy. There is none of that connection. You will lose it. And I think for the West Shore area, having dispatched out here, that's what makes the West Shore amazing, is because everybody here works together. All these 5 cities here are connected. They keep bridging gaps that regional centers aren't going to be able to do. So if that's any takeaway from you, or if anybody had any further questions they want to ask from somebody sitting inside the dispatch center, there's really a lot. I have no problem talking to anybody about it, because you guys are really going to lose a lot with these great people back here that would do anything for the city of North Olmsted. That's it.
Hi, my name's Tom Austin, 10147 Royalton Road, North Royalton, Ohio. I'm the executive director of the Ohio Patrolmen's Benevolent Association, the leader that represents these people here. And I'm also a 26-year police officer from the east side. And in my 26 years as a police officer, I was involved in a lot of critical incidents, but one that I remember specifically where an officer on my shift under my watch, I was a sergeant, shot and killed an individual. And I couldn't tell you how more thankful I was to have dispatchers that were connected to our city. I worked in Twinsburg. They were the most dedicated, hardworking, and committed people that I ever met with. That day was the day that nobody should ever experience, including a dispatcher. I had a young officer, his first day was in training, in the second phase of training. I had another officer that just shot and killed somebody and a family that was mourning because it happened right in front of them. And I couldn't be more thankful to walk back to that station and be able to look at those dispatchers and say thank you. I'm also a statewide union president. I know unions get a rap. That's fine. I'll take that rap all day long for these hardworking people. And I would tell you this, is think hard, long and hard about what's going on in the world today and in your own city. Does this change need to make today? And as politicians, chiefs, as leaders, I think you owe answers to the folks in this room or to your own staff. Because, you know, the American Rescue Act, there was a lot of money given out to a lot of cities. I'd ask the community, and I'd ask you guys to be transparent. What happened to that money, or where is that money? What's the status of it? Could those upgrades be made with that money? There's also things that people really believe in, and that's called democracy. It's called due process. Why don't we give these folks the ability to vote on this? There's a lot of passionate people that came in here tonight and asked a lot of legitimate questions about the Cuyahoga County leaders and about you as leaders. I'm not saying you're not good leaders. I'm not saying the chiefs aren't good leaders. I'm saying, why don't we have a conversation? That's the one thing about due process. That's the one thing about collective bargaining. And to my colleague Danielle said, you guys signed a contract. What about the contract? What if Chagrin Valley says, we're not going to honor your contract anymore? A contract is a commitment. And you know what? When we're leaders, we commit to the folks we represent. And I'm asking you today, what is your commitment to these folks and to the communities of North Olmsted and Fairview Park? I appreciate that you're letting us speak tonight. I appreciate that you guys have a hard job. The chiefs have a hard job. But in the end, I think we deserve transparency. These folks deserve transparency. This community deserves to know they're safe. And you know what? I would take a, to the clerk, I would like to take a look at those 17 letters. How do those communities compare to this community? Every community is different. I appreciate your time, and I can answer any questions if somebody has someone available today, tomorrow, or any day. You can reach me by email or phone. And I'll give you my phone number, 440-237-7900. And I will tell you, I've been statewide, and I've sat next to police officers, just like my colleague from the FOP. When officers have been involved in critical incidents, they've either been killed or something as critical has happened. And the people that have kept it together, the majority of the time, besides the officers that did it, they're like air traffic controllers. It's the dispatchers, and they're always the forgotten people. Remember them today. Remember them when you make your vote. The safety matters, and let's do our due diligence. Thank you.
My name is Beth Vance. I live in Cleveland, 4561 Broaddale. I want to again urge council to keep North Olmsted Dispatch in North Olmsted. You presently have a dedicated group of professional dispatchers. Several have 20 to 30 plus years of working just for the city of North Olmsted. We know the city, the businesses, and the residents. We work with North Olmsted Police face to face every day. We know their voices, and they know ours. That is something you will not get if you vote to move dispatch to Chagrin Valley in dispatch in Cleveland Heights. That is something that you cannot achieve in a call center that has different dispatchers working North Olmsted desk every day, especially with the high turnover rate in dispatching. When we started dispatching for Fairview Park Police last year, North Olmsted's police chief was quoted as saying, "I think it's better service for the citizens of North Olmsted if we keep it here versus having our calls answered somewhere else." That is still true today. I'm sure that was the same feeling in Fairview Park, in addition to having patrolmen on the road instead of on station. Dispatchers, we are union, we are civil service, we have been essential workers through COVID, just like the police and firefighters, 24/7, 365. We didn't work from home or placed unpaid COVID leave during the pandemic. We were here for the public, in person taking reports on station to searching prisoners. It has been well established through documentation that you have all received from the county and the state that regionalized dispatch is not mandatory. If the push to Chagrin Valley is due to a city needing an additional server as a backup equipment, then I suggest you use the over $468,000 buy-in money or the $822,000 annual fee, or even the to-be-determined monthly fee that you will be paying Chagrin Valley and invest that money in your own city's dispatch center. The full-time IT person salary is already in the 2023 Police Department budget. The same software, mapping, and 911 equipment is provided to each city. Some cities don't get better equipment than other cities in the county. It is what you do with it and how it is used that makes the difference. When the fire department needed a new fire truck and squad, and the police department needed a range upgrade or the building addition, the city invested the money. Dispatch is no different. Purchasing the equipment that is needed is an investment in the future of the city. Dispatch is not just a line item on a budget sheet and shouldn't be treated as one. We are there taking the calls from business owners whose store was just robbed at gunpoint, the resident calling when their house is on fire, a parent whose child is missing, a person pleading for help, trying to keep their loved ones alive with CPR, a person finding a friend that is overdosed or has killed themselves, or talking to a person while they are taking their last breath, all waiting for police and fire to arrive. Seconds and minutes save lives.
Kendra Adams, I'm a part-time dispatcher, 5 years here at City of North Olmsted. Mayor and Council, as you consider your vote to consolidate dispatch into CBD, please hear the following. While the county is encouraging consolidation, they have not enforced it and will not enforce it. ORC 128 is continuously referenced as a reason to make the decision to consolidate. To simplify, it pertains to wireless PSAPs. CCOMS is the only wireless PSAP in Cuyahoga County, therefore Cuyahoga County is in compliance with such ordinance. Section 571, which has been referred to in selling CBD to the city, talks about reducing PSAPs by a certain date. Again, this only applies to wireless PSAPs. CCOMS is the only wireless PSAP. June 14th, a letter was sent to all PSAPs stating that any PSAP that was not consolidated and dispatching for 5 or less jurisdictions would be responsible for the monthly cost of their ASE circuit along with the monthly maintenance fee for any positions the county deemed not necessary. That was to become effective July 1st. Initially, North Olmsted was going to be required to pay for a third position, but when Fairview PD consolidated, that fee was waived. North Olmsted will be paying the ASC circuit fee of $333.33 a month. That's the only additional cost to be incurred. Rounded up, it's roughly $4,000 annually. However, on June 9th, 2022, the 911 Planning Committee voted to suspend this charge for the remainder of 2022. House Bill 445 is legislation to update the ORC, which has also been referenced, in my opinion, something the city should have researched by now and should wait until the legislation is either passed or not. Significant changes to the ORC if this legislation passes are, it removes the term wireless from the legislation, which makes all PSAPs required to maintain compliance with the ORC itself, along with OAC 5507 PSAP operating rules. It eliminates any language pertaining to the total number of PSAPs any county can have. It outlines additional funding. I don't want to waste too much time. Also, as far as the county goes, they've, in March 2022, they awarded Mission Critical Partners a contract to do a citywide emergency communications asset. It aims to look at several things about how money will be spent, what it will look like in 3 years. Tentative completion date is set for October 2022. I still think we should wait before you rush this decision. What the city currently has in its dispatch center is rare. It's a fully staffed it's fully staffed. You don't have that anywhere else in this county. The extensive years of service each individual dispatcher has given to the city is unmatched. I've worked in many centers over the last 23 years, including one regional center. I left after a month. It's not all it's perceived to be. Also, North Olmsted is currently not even into 1 year into a 5-year contract with Fairview for their police dispatch. It's pretty bad business to enter into a contract you had no intention of continuing.
Chris Kelly, law enforcement. I won't be giving my address. I wasn't going to say anything tonight, but a couple people had spoke that just felt like I had to just say one thing. There's many factors that go into this. I have no doubt that all those, both the chiefs and Mayor, Sergeant Fiorito, all of those making this decision took their time to think about what is the best place for us to go as a regional dispatch. One thing I can just only speak of as a from a law enforcement side is, it was mentioned earlier, the Starbucks robbery. As maybe some of you know, I was the first responding officer. She had mentioned the cruiser window being shot out. That was my cruiser window. The only thing I want to say on that whole incident is that being the one involved, having an adrenaline dump where my heart rate went through the roof like no other, having a familiar voice in Mark Madden speak to me in that time helped calm me down. At that moment, I didn't know a lot of what was going on. I didn't even know if I was shot at that moment. I just knew that I had to finish my portion of that time before the next officers were able to take over. And the person that helped keep me calm in that time was one of our very own, Mark Madden, who was able to keep me calm and able to, when the incident first began, dispatch us right away without hesitation. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Bonnie Schmitz. I've lived in North Olmsted with my family since 1973. I live on 5414 Decker Road, and I had to call dispatch many years ago because my neighbor was being raped by a multi-state serial rapist. She was brave and escaped. We got her in our home. I called dispatch. Had they not been familiar, I was like so emotional and sky high. All I could say is I live on Decker Road, and the neighbors are chasing him through the creek over the truck lot fence, and she knew exactly what I was talking about. When I contacted people about why we would consider moving our dispatch, I was told it was about the laws, but tonight I've heard that's not true. I pray that you take this serious and keep our dispatch in our community, and I hope you hear the people here.
Hello. My name is Chrissy Johnson. I am a dispatcher for North Olmsted. I live in the city of Lorraine. I've been in this city since 2010, and I stand today to ask you not to pass this legislation. I'm standing here to ask you, have you done your due diligence? Have you followed up with your residents, emails, phone calls? Have you shadowed any of us 15? Have you thought about your residents? Have you thought about their lives, your family's lives, if this passes? In 19 years that I've been doing this job, I've worked with some phenomenal people. And these 15 behind me, man, they are some of the absolute best in the business. We are CPR certified, we are EMD certified, and we are fully staffed. That doesn't come lightly. We learn every nook and cranny to this city before we are placed on our own to dispatch any of the disciplines, police, fire, or 911. In the last 6 weeks, you've heard from countless employees and residents. 2 weeks ago, you heard from the only 2 people to come forward to give their sales pitch about why this is the best option. For the second time, I had heard ISO scores being mentioned. So I looked into it. I did my research. 911 and communications are only 10% of this rating. It's a rating that's based on a 1 to 10 scale. 1 being the best, 10 being unable to meet the requirements. The fire chief that spoke to you told you that his city went from an 8.5 to a 10. That doesn't sound too promising for the residents. The second speaker, Director DeSico, appeared to be selling his product. Better, faster, and cheaper. I won't contest to the better part of it. I won't badmouth other dispatchers. Faster, it's not necessarily true. Over a dozen serious calls I found on the internet from agencies that use CVD, anywhere from a 2-minute to 25-minute response time. Dispatch time, not response time, from the time the call was initially taken to the time that the call was assigned to an officer. These were anything from ag burgs to domestic violences, all including guns. Cheaper. Now here's the tricky part. There's no fines or penalties. We've heard this. I did have contact with the state director and the county 911 coordinator in an email saying once again, there's no impending rush on this. They are not going to be coming after the city for any reason. Dispatch overtime has been reduced drastically now that we are fully staffed, meaning we have 3 fully operational stations. We are 6 feet away from each other. If I need something, I overhear my partner needing something, I am right there to go ahead and do that. The contract with Fairview brings in $225,000 a year for dispatch. We're not even 1 year into a 5-year contract. Not to mention that there's a $1.3 million buy-in for Chagrin Valley. In conclusion, we can discuss facts, figures, and statistics all day long, but when it comes to the seriousness of 911 and what that means, and having a knowledgeable professional answering your phone call when you need help the most, why rush this decision?
Pam Chesser. I'm retired from the police department after 30 years. I'm a little nervous. I hadn't planned talking. But one day when I was working in the evening, a guy came running into the lobby, yelling that his friend was down in our parking lot having an attack from a bee sting. Our fire dispatcher was there. She was getting to the fire department immediately. Our other dispatcher, police, happened to have an EpiPen. She saved his life. This guy would have died if we had regional. No one would have been there. And on a side note, I've been watching you people for 3 or 4 meetings now, and there's several, including you, Mayor, that look like you're bored, you don't care, you don't want to hear this. And that's disappointing to me.
I'll be quick. My name is Mike Babinick. I live at 27981 North Park Drive. Been there for over 30 years. There's a lot I didn't know coming here tonight, and I certainly learned a lot, that's for sure. What I do know is that I live on North Park Drive. If you have an emergency call coming to your house, you know North Park Estates is just, what is it, a minute away? North Park Drive is in Fairview Park. My son needed to call 911 once because a family member had a health emergency. He was able to handle it. The healthcare response was immediate, it was flawless, and it saved someone's life. That's pretty cool when a child can initiate that, and the system worked. I had a neighbor, had a heart attack, January, below 20 degrees. I'm out there at 7 o'clock in the morning trying to do CPR. My wife called 911. I was so glad when the police showed up and was able to give me a break from doing the CPR because the response was immediate. It was flawless. They knew where North Park Drive was. Do you guys know the golf course that's down on Butternut Ridge Road? You guys know that one? Do you know there's 2 of them there? Another family member had a health emergency at the other one, North Olmsted Golf Course. When you say North Olmsted Golf Course, you think Springvale. No, it's North Olmsted Golf Course. That's its name. It's right across the street. The emergency response was immediate. It was flawless, and again, I think it saved her life. And then it happened again in the afternoon, the same place. They came to the same place. I think there's something to say about having that familiarity with the city, with the streets, with the place, that makes that response so immediate. All I can say is that when there's a health emergency, time is so critical. And it's not worth saving a couple of pennies or whatever it is. It's flawless. It's good.
My name's Riley Vertosnik. I live on 3569 Columbia Road. I would like to stand up here on behalf of the younger generation. I am 21 years old. I graduated in the class of 2019 from North Olmsted. I currently attend Mercyhurst University, where I am majoring in criminal justice. I plan on being a law enforcement officer. I would like to be a law enforcement officer for my own city. And I know that would be a lot easier having dispatchers that are in our own department knowing our streets, and having relationships with us. Thank you.
My name is Barb Abraham. I live at 6252 Pebblebrook Lane in North Olmsted, and we have lived here for almost 33 years. I've been actually very pleased with our dispatch center. When this came up, and I was just made aware of this a month ago, I went into an earnest search for the information, the financial information, the reasoning behind doing this, and the justification for pushing it through. I haven't gotten anything. Mary Ellen was gracious enough to have a conversation with me, but did not even have the documentation. The mayor's office sent out a pros and cons list, as well as the cost effectiveness of going to Chagrin Valley. When we take it with, I'm assuming those numbers are correct because there isn't any substantial documentation behind them, but I'm gonna give you the benefit of the doubt. We're gonna save $1.9 million over 5 years to go to Chagrin Valley. If you take that and divide it by the population, per resident, it's $97 a month, or 97 cents a month. My safety is worth more than $12 a year.
Mr. President. Mr. President.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. I did spend quite a bit of time with Mrs. Abraham. We're fortunate that we have family members in common with our children, so, you know, I've known her for a long time. I did take, actually, I want to say, all of this information to her home. And all of this information to her home. We had a very lengthy discussion, and I did have a lot of information, and I did leave information with her. So to be fair to me, I have done more than enough research and did share that with anyone who really did want to know. So to say that I did not have the information, I think is fairly inaccurate, although I think we did have a respectable and good conversation. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Beth Gabura. I'm a former full-time dispatcher for North Olmsted. I was with the city for 14 years. You'll have to excuse me, I don't have anything planned. I wasn't planning on speaking. Some wonderful people have gotten up today, given lots of information on facts and figures and stories. I just wanted to share one story with you when I was a dispatcher, where time was of the essence. I received a 911 call from a frantic mother in tears that her 8-day-old baby was choking and turning blue. Not 8 weeks, not 8 months, 8 days. And because I thankfully knew the city, I was able to dispatch the appropriate fire and police, which allowed me to give her infant CPR instructions over the phone, which saved that baby's life. So I ask you, council members, when you make your decision, consider your heart when it's your family or your spouse or your grandbaby that's choking and time is of the essence. Thank you.
My name is Mark Madden. I'm a resident in North Olmsted, 42 years, and 27 years of that as a dispatcher. I've been racking my brain for the last month, trying to figure out what do I need to say to convince you people that are gathered here tonight that this is a terrible idea, especially at the pace we're going. Why are we here tonight? We're making a decision based on a topic that's been, in some cases, misrepresented, misinformation presented, I don't know how any of you could sit there and even make heads or tails of this. I know one of my coworkers had invited everyone to visit our dispatch center. I wish you had all come, because until you're there on a daily basis, or at least for a couple hours, you can't understand it. The tension, dealing with people in their emergency, and being able to stay calm. That's what we do. Why are all these first responders here tonight? There's no emergency here. The only thing I can think of is the emergency that we could create ourselves by sending this dispatch function over to the east side. I went to college at John Carroll. I'm a little bit familiar, but not enough to dispatch. Those are important issues. You don't want people that don't know your city dispatching your safety forces. It is going to result in delays, and errors can happen, costly errors. This isn't about me. It's not about these people. This is now in your hands. You people on council are going to decide what we do. Do you feel comfortable that you have accurate information? I really question it. I've stormed every source of information I could find, and I still am confused by things. This has just been too rushed. I've said it from the beginning. I'll say it again tonight. I'll say it till my grave. I said the last meeting also, I can't think of a more important vote that you as council people will take during your career than this. How many other things do you decide that can determine somebody's fate? An error happening that causes somebody to die, or even injuries that could have been avoided if somebody had been sent that was closer to the incident that they were going to. Some people would say that we don't have a choice. Westcom won't work. My comeback to that is, we're not on a timeline here where this has to be decided tonight, even this year. We've got time on this. You've heard from many of the people, there aren't fines, nothing that's going to amount to anything, nothing that would prompt a decision to be rushed through on a whim. What's baffled me partially during this process is we belong to a council of governments. That's where this belongs. This is a regional effort. We should be working with our West Shore communities to figure out a solution, a West Side solution. It might be keeping it at North Olmsted. We are a regional dispatch center. We dispatch for North Olmsted and Fairview. We're the only city doing that. Westcom does it for the fire department. So I encourage all of the communities, mayors, to work on this together. And get some input from dispatchers, please. We have been excluded from this process. We have been informed after meetings as to what happened. We had no input in those meetings because we weren't invited. Get input from the dispatchers. They do the job. They know what they're doing. They should have a voice at the table. I'll say it again. This is about you. You, people of council, are going to make a decision that affects 32,000 people in this community, as well as visitors. We get 911 calls from visitors at the mall that need emergency care. So there's a lot of responsibility with this decision. So I hope you'll all take some time, reflect on it, pray, ask for some direction, ask more questions, maybe even draw the county administrator into the conversation to get clarification. For some reason, that's been excluded from the process for the most part. And finally, to the mayor. I know your goal is to move our community into the future and move us forward. Everyone in this room wants that too. We're all on the same team. We want to help you to accomplish that. So I hope you'll invite us to the conversation and help you to move the community forward. I guess I'll just say thank you to all of you. I know this has been a lengthy discussion on a resolution, probably one of the longer ones you've experienced, but it is critical. So God bless you, and I offer you my peace.
Mr. President,
Mayor.
if it pleases council, if I could please ask that our fire chief and police chief address some of the concerns that we've heard tonight.
Of course.
Thank you.
Council President.
Oh, okay, I didn't realize we had another speaker.
It was a last minute thing. My name's Carrie Maxwell. I live at 24357 Laverne, and I've lived in North Olmsted since 1964. I have never been to a council meeting before, and I have never spoke at a council meeting before. But this is something I think is really important to our community. I have had to call other dispatch areas, I think the Strongville dispatch area, the CCOM before from a different city that I've worked in. And it's really hard talking to those people. You can tell it's just a rush. It's there's things that you're you're upset, you're trying to deal with things and you need more calm. You may get switched over. I know that every time I've ever called North Olmsted for dispatch or talking to anybody there, it's a comfort. It's nice knowing that everybody here knows where everything is. You can say, like other people have mentioned, I'm up at the BP station, and they know where you are. They always know where you are. It's always comforting. It's always easy. North Olmsted is a very large city, and I know I've been told many times, because I've lived here for so long, you can talk about people or anybody, and somebody, somebody. As large of a community we are, you can mention a name and you know somebody. And I've been told, how do you know somebody in such a large community? Because everybody is very close. It's a large, tight-knit community. And I feel that if it were sent to one of the dispatch regions, a lot of bad things could happen, that's all. I didn't want to be too lengthy, but I just wanted to make my point, because I've lived here for a long time. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you for your time.
Council President, council members, mayor, directors, guests. I just wanted to say a couple words. I'm sure no matter what I say, I think everybody's mind in this room is pretty much made up on how they feel on the situation. But there has been some misinformation that's gone out. You know, one of the big things that we keep hearing about over and over again is why rush this? It's a rush job. What a lot of people in this room don't realize, this has been going on for years. We've been having these discussions with the administration, previous and this administration. This has been ongoing for quite some time. A lot of things about do your due diligence. I've been a police officer here for almost 25 years. I care very deeply about this city. I plan on working here for a lot longer time to come. So the future of this city is of my utmost importance. I care deeply for my officers, my dispatchers, everybody that works at my station, as well as the fire department. I don't think there's anything here that's been any kind of rush job whatsoever. We've looked at, and I have been quoted several times, I stand behind every single thing I've ever been quoted on. I would love to have it here in the North Olmsted if it was feasible. We can't recreate what they have. It would be a very bad business decision to try and do that. We've looked at that. I've heard a lot of people talk about we should do it here on the West Shore. You know, we've had people talk about, you know, what's going to happen if the station's unmanned at night. It's okay to have it at Westcom where the station's unmanned at night, but it's not okay to have it at Chagrin Valley. There's been a lot of, several times it's been mentioned about this poor gentleman that died at the cost of Chagrin Valley doing something wrong. And I think when Director DeSico got up and urged everybody to call him if they wanted to find out the real story on that, he would be willing to tell them. He wasn't looking to bring it out in the public, but I talked to Director DeSico a few days ago. I asked him how many calls he got for somebody that wanted to know the real story, since it's been brought up so many times. I was the only one. I was the only person that called to find out what happened. Chagrin Valley didn't do anything wrong. When we started dispatching for Fairview Park, I can tell you how many dispatchers wanted that to happen. 0. We were told that as soon as we start dispatching for Fairview, dispatchers were going to quit. It would be very, very easy for me to sit over there and continue doing business the way we've been doing it for 30 years. The mayor doesn't expect that from me. The safety director doesn't expect that from me. I know the council members don't expect that from me. The residents don't expect that from me. Again, in my professional opinion, and I know we've had lots and lots of discussions over this, Chagrin Valley is the best option for us moving forward into the future. It's not a rush job. It's not a $1.2 million buy-in like people have been referencing tonight. You guys have the figures in front of you. You know what the buy-in is. It's just false information. So, again, there's not, like I said, there's not a lot that I could say that's going to change everybody's mind, but I do want to let you know that I care very deeply. I've lost a lot of sleep over this. Probably still will. This doesn't make my job any easier. What's going on here tonight is very understandable. It's the same thing that happened in Independence when they moved to Chagrin Valley and moved away from their dispatch center. It's the same thing that happened in Solon. It's the same thing that happened in Broadview Heights. I understand it. I get it. You guys have the letters of recommendation from the city officials, whether it's from the mayor, the police chief, the fire chief, and so on. So I thank you for your time, and I appreciate your outlook on this. I'm always available for questions if you need. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of council, mayor, directors. We've heard a lot of narratives bounce back and forth over the last several weeks, months. Some of it's legit, some of it's spot on, some of it's misinformation that is purposely let out there to either delay the process or try to meet somebody else's agenda. We've heard things like North Olmsted residents, their safety's at risk. That's not what Director DeSico has promised us. We can do the same thing now.
Let's afford him the same respect that all of you received. Thank you.
The other things we've heard, CVD's too far away. Well, what's too far away? Is 20 miles okay? Is 10 miles, 5 miles, next town over, 2 towns over, across the river, this side of the river? Tell me what's the appropriate distance for a regional dispatch center. There's many other regional dispatch centers across the state, and they work. Regional dispatch centers would not flourish if they didn't work. Slower response times. This one, I've not heard any reason for their slower response times. They don't know the community. We hire firefighters, and when they come to us from all over. They don't come to us just from North Olmsted, they come from all over. And the current roster of our fire department, they're from all over 4 counties. And what do we do with them when we hire them? We train them to know the community. Because not every system is 100% foolproof. Human beings are present, and human beings do make mistakes. In dispatch, in the police, in the fire, there are mistakes made. Now, we try to minimize those mistakes, and we have redundant systems in place to correct those, but we teach our firefighters to know the community. The simple fact is, our current dispatch setup does not meet the NFPA standards. The fire department functions under NFPA, National Fire Protection Association. The police, this does not apply to. The National Fire Protection Association has set standards for call processing time. When does the call hit dispatch, and when do the guys in the stations hear the tones? We don't meet those standards. We don't meet it nowhere close. CVD does. That's just one point to make. The current ISO rating, it was mentioned earlier tonight, and it's a small part of it. I agree, it is 10 points. She's absolutely correct. But one of the areas where we hit a bad deficit was in the call processing time. We only got 7 points out of a total of 20 points. Now let's put the ISO stuff aside. Let's put that, okay, because that is important. But let's take it down to the person who's calling 911 and needs help. And somebody referenced a stroke tonight. We had a call, and this just happened 3 weeks ago, where dispatch lost where a med unit was. They were actually a mile closer than the one they toned out. And it took them over 2 minutes to get the call out, plus an additional minute. These aren't one and done things. These happened again and again and again. And it's our job, Chief Wagner's and mine, to look for ways to improve the system. Of course, this isn't popular. We've had a parade of people here today saying they're not comfortable with this move. So what's this really about? We're talking about change here. We're not talking about ISO ratings and safety to the citizens and all that. We're talking about change here. That's what we're really talking about here. And change is uncomfortable, especially if you perceive some kind of risk here. And our dispatchers, as good as they are, they do stand a loss here. And that's what they're upset about. And I get it. I understand it. It makes people anxious. If we move our dispatch operation someplace else, whether it's at home, whether it's on your job, whatever, they get anxious about it. Perceived risk or perceived change is risky, and that's what we're here to do. You didn't ask us to follow the status quo. You didn't ask us to just follow things the way they are normal. That's why you entrusted us to do that. You asked Chief Wagner to do the same thing. You as council members are change agents. The administration, you are change agents. Whether you like it or not, that's what the seat you're sitting in. I sit in that very same seat. The true risk is doing nothing or stand status quo, stand pat. That's the real risk here. If we don't do anything and we let things go by, then people become complacent, they become comfortable, and that's where we're at today. We are in a situation where people are comfortable with what they're doing, and the status quo continues, continues, and continues. Jack Welch, the ex-CEO for General Electric, he once said, if the rate of change on the outside exceeds the rate of change on the inside, the end is near. Well, we're not keeping up with the change. That's the problem. And when we bring up change, people don't like it. And I get it. There's change that I don't like, okay? Our status quo is comfortable. That's what's become, and that's what we've gotten to be really complacent with. So I give credit to the mayor. I give credit to you, to the council, for at least examining these options that have been presented to you. I don't mean to speak for the mayor, but the former mayor of the city of Philadelphia once said, I didn't run for mayor to be caretaker of the status quo. And that's what we're doing here. We're looking to move things forward. I stand united with our police chief. The poor guy has been subject to name calling and stuff that nobody should be put up with. And for that, I stand there and support him. So I would urge you to consider this legislation very carefully tonight. And your support is very much appreciated. Thank you.
Excuse me, could I ask a question of you? Could I ask a question?
Chief, I would just advise to do that offline. She's welcome to speak. She's welcome to speak.
My name is Mary Lee Stang. I live at 4054 Clay Road. The gentleman was just saying things are at status quo. Well, if things are, say, status quo with the dispatchers, why not help them get more training instead of running off to Chagrin Falls, which I'm not in favor of. It takes, if you're in cardiac arrest, it takes 4 minutes. You've got to have help within 4 minutes or you're in trouble. So why not spend some money to improve the dispatchers if he thinks they need improvement?
I don't know if I'm allowed to have a second turn, but
Go ahead,
in
Beth.
response to, I'm Beth Vance, Cleveland, Ohio. I dispatch for police and fire, and I've done that for 33 years. And I'm sorry, but how dare the fire chief say that we've become status quo and our times are on par? You take a fireman and you train him, and then that's a fireman, regardless of where he lives or where and comes to work. That same fireman's going to sit in that chair, the same person, for years to come. You take it'd be like putting a new fireman or a new dispatcher every day in the dispatch chair that doesn't know your city. Status quo is not always bad. It's the normal, it's the knowledge that you need. You don't want a new person in the chair every day, having no idea what your city is, and throwing the dispatcher in a chair of another city, putting their citizens at risk. The chief has called us to say we need a 1-minute response time to dispatch. And we've done that, we've met that. Sure, we make mistakes, we call Squad 52 by Squad 53. The firemen have done the same thing, to throw our mistakes and just give us lack of respect that we owe or that we deserve. I'm sorry. And I can count on one hand how many times the fire chief has been in dispatch. So for him to know what goes on in dispatch is the furthest from the truth. I'm sorry, I couldn't sit back and just get slammed for the phenomenal dispatch center we have and the dispatchers that work there.
My name is Pam Foster, 23381 Marion Road in North Olmsted. On January 25th this year, I became a widow for the second time. I was in bed, heard two loud bangs, woke up, and found my husband on the floor. I called 911, and thank you, Lord, for the dispatcher that talked to me and was so compassionate. And if you guys change this, will the new dispatch team be able to help people like me get through a situation like this? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Bud Seigan. I live at 26606 Sweetbriar Drive in North Olmsted. I grew up here. In 1983, I moved to Elyria. I moved back to North Olmsted back in September. Couple reasons. Am I boring you? Okay. First, my childhood home came up for sale, so I bought it. I could have gone anywhere. I could have gone to any other cities, but I chose North Olmsted for a reason. Because I know that the city services here are good. If I have to call 911, I'll hear a siren within a couple of minutes. I heard our police chief, our fire chief, say we've come complacent. We've come comfortable. Do you know why we're comfortable? Because we know when we call 911, help is on its way in a matter of seconds, maybe minutes. Mrs. Mayor, answer your question. You have a heart attack, or Mrs. Gilchrist. How long are you willing to lay on the floor until help is able to get there before the call goes from here to Chagrin Falls to back to help you out? You have a stroke. How long are you willing to lay on the floor? Every minute counts. We have a fine service department. Fire, police, I've known police almost all my life. Dispatchers. What's the need to reinvent the wheel? I heard someone say it'll run roughly 97 cents a month per resident, $12 a year. I'll pay that all day long because I like to know when I need the services, whether it's fire, whether it's police, whether it's whatever, that they're going to get there. That my wife may come visit me in a hospital, not in a morgue, because it just took too long. Thank you.
Seeing no other comments from the audience, we will now move into legislation.
Legislation on third reading, ordinance 2022-26, an ordinance introduced by Mayor Jones creating new section 1139.13 entitled Phased Development of Chapter 1139 of the Planning and Zoning Code of the Codified Ordinances of the City of North Olmsted entitled Business Districts for the purpose of authorizing phased development plans in North Olmsted business districts.
Mr. President, I'd like to move for adoption and ask for a second.
Second.
Motion to adopt ordinance 2022-26 made by Councilman Limpert and seconded by Councilwoman Williamson. Roll call, please.
No.
I'm sorry, Councilwoman Heeman. Roll call, please.
Mr. Lippert,
Yes.
Ms. Heeman,
Yes.
Ms. Gilchrist?
Yes.
Mr. Glassbern?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Scarl?
Yes.
Ms. Williamson?
Yes.
Ordinance 2022-26 is adopted by a vote of 7-0.
Resolution 2022-55, a resolution introduced by Mayor Jones authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with Chagrin Valley Dispatch for the purpose of providing emergency dispatch services for the city of North Olmsted and declaring an emergency.
Mr. President,
Councilman.
I would move to adopt 2022-55 and ask for a second.
Second.
Motion to adopt Resolution 2022-55 made by Councilman Glassbern and seconded by Councilman Limpert. Roll call, please.
Mr. Glassbern?
Yes.
Mr. Limpert?
No with comment. First off, I'd like to say that, this is one of the toughest issues that I've had to deal with as a council member, and I've been on longer than most of the council members here. I'd also say that as far as it being rushed, there's been discussions of regionalization around fire and police for over 15 years. I recall doing consulting in 2006 where Cleveland was standing up their regional dispatch. So this is not a new topic or a new investigation given the expansion we looked at from the fire station years ago to do regional dispatch and from the police station to try to do police dispatching within the city. So this isn't a rushed decision. Now, the impetus to try to put this on the agenda currently, I feel is slightly rushed, given that some of the implications of what needs to happen isn't until 2023, and with discussions with the police chief, there's more time to determine the onboarding, but I respect the mayor in trying to move this forward. And unfortunately, some of these discussions about Westcom or West Side Dispatch, I've spent a number of hours over the last several months talking not only with our peers, with the administration, with the police chief, with county council members, with other council members on other cities, listening to feedback from the mayor's community of governments, council of governments for the West Side, with the hope of a West Side Regional Dispatch, which as of this time for this vote does not seem feasible. Coming out of the meeting, we've been notified that there's a July 13th meeting related to other communities interested, or at least understanding what the capabilities are of other dispatch centers. And I think we should still consider that, because so far the administration has said that, we don't want to be left off, which I respect, but have not seen where any other councils are moving forward at this point. And I think there's still worth an observation to see if a West Side Dispatch is possible. With that being said, progress needs to happen. These discussions need to be had, and I respect the mayor for trying to move this forward in the best way possible, try to do his best for North Olmsted. Thank you.
Mr. Scarl?
Yes, with comment. I'm a 46-year resident. I want to be very clear that it's not an easy vote for me. I've had several conversations with the administration, looked at all the information council's received, and listened to all the questions and arguments that have been made at multiple committee and council meetings on this topic. I am comfortable with the process that took place and the information received. The safety of our residents is the most important factor in all of this. If I felt the safety of our residents was at risk, I would be voting no. I am confident the administration and the city would not bring this forward if there were concerns about the safety of our residents. I've heard if we cannot stay in North Olmsted, that dispatching should be moved to Westcom. First of all, Westcom is not a viable option at this time. I'm not willing to vote to enter into a contract with an organization that's not even currently certified to dispatch police. I won't take that chance with the residents' safety. Yes, there is a cost savings to this, But let me be clear, my yes vote is not due to a cost savings. My yes vote is based on our safety director, our police chief, fire chief, saying Chagrin Valley provides a level of service that just cannot be matched in North Olmsted. That's not a knock on our dispatchers. I am proud of the work they've done. But CVD has a level of service we just cannot match. I trust the experts and say, if they say this will not lower the quality of emergency response. If anything, it will make it better for North Olmsted. I take this at their word. For the reasons stated above, my vote is yes. Thank you.
Ms. Williamson?
No.
Ms. Gilchrist?
Wait, I'm not done, I'm sorry. I need a moment. May I continue?
Oh, please.
We have held a number of meetings to discuss this issue. Some of those meetings were very long. There was a lot of information to be discussed and considered. While our meetings focused on the services of CVD and their compatibility with our present needs, the discussion seemed to shift to Westcom. While Westcom is a well-established entity in the West Shore area, it was noted that they may not be able to provide all of the services we would require at this time. It has been my desire to hold this matter in committee until we could find a solution if we needed to regionalize. However, pressure was made to move this legislation along, otherwise it would be pulled for a vote sooner than tonight. This impedes our legislative process. In consideration of the information we have received at this time, what I deem is the only logical alternative is to keep our North Olmsted dispatchers here at home in North Olmsted. We have the best group of dispatchers around. They are the best of the best. And there is no one that can do a better job. And having been a resident who has needed the services of a dispatcher when I first moved into this city, knowing the compassion, their knowledge, their ability to calm me down, I can't say we could ever get that from another agency. But I thank you all for everything that you do.
Ms. Gilchrist?
Yes.
Ms. Heeman?
Yes, with a comment, please. My background is Fortune 500 Chapter 11 work. It was heartbreaking to work on things like LTV steel and tell people their wages and benefits were being cut. Unfortunately, you save tax bases and other things. Not all work is easy. Dispatch work is not easy. I personally spent time at Chagrin Valley Dispatch 2 hours yesterday on a holiday because I thought that might afford me the opportunity to hear the greatest number of dispatch calls. I listened, they gave me a headset. I sat with a supervisor. They offered me to sit with any dispatcher that I wanted. So I sat with a supervisor dispatching fire because that seemed the least invasive with regards to leads, procedures, and those other things. They're organized in 2 pods, a supervisor in each pod. During my 2 hours there, they did take in 295 calls. I witnessed a 911 call dropped and brought back by that dispatcher within less than 20 seconds. They do know where you are. They have 3 to 4 methods of finding you immediately. The only way they cannot find you is if your cell phone has been turned off because you didn't pay the bill. The legislation that they follow provides that your cell phone will dial 911, but it doesn't have service, so if that call dropped, they cannot call you back because technically you don't have a number, right? So that's something that has to be looked at through cell phone carriers, not through any dispatch service. I next went to And all of their calls were, I mean, there's a 3-page list here. There were welfare checks, there were, lost animals, found animals, fireworks, I mean, any number of things. I next went to our own dispatch center where I sat with them. I was not permitted out of council. They didn't explain to me what they did or didn't do. I asked questions, and I can honestly say with absolute certainty, you are safe. I am safe as a resident with Chagrin Valley Dispatch. I am certain of that, as a matter of fact. Some of the things that, this is not new. 2013, we spent $21,600 to move the radio tower, anticipating this. 2016, we spent $40,000 upgrading consoles and equipment that now are 6 years old and need to be upgraded again. And we just really, it's a lot of money, folks. It's a lot of money. This isn't only an economic decision. I can tell you that in 2021, yes, we do get $225,000 from Fairview. Fairview wanted to get rid of their dispatch because they had police officers dispatching and they wanted their boots on the ground. With our ARPA money, we gave the ability to have 2 more police officers over the number recommended by our chiefs because we want more boots on the ground. So that dispatch doesn't have to be 5 minutes away or 5 hours away. 5 hours might be too far. But with regard to, is it in a neighboring community, or is it in Chagrin Falls, or is it in, Cleveland Heights where this is? That does not matter. They do know where you are. You can look at people are saying that, oh my gosh, we're going to die of a heart attack. I can tell you equal number of friends that say Cleveland Clinic killed their relative, Cleveland Clinic saved their relative. So I don't know how you value that or compare it, because I don't actually believe that having our dispatch somewhere else will kill anybody. Those kinds of things are other errors. Our police officers, our fire personnel know where we live. They know where we live. I live at that golf course, and let me tell you, they know who we are. They do welfare checks all the time in our neighborhood. They know where we are. They do. So, I have so many other things to say, but, there's just not a West Side option right now. Right now, there are only so many councils available for us to be able to have the opportunity to change. And I respect our mayor and our chiefs for standing up for this, for our residents. And if there becomes an option to come back to the West Side, I would gladly undertake that. So, my vote is yes. Thank you.
Mr. Kelly?
No, with comment. The city of North Olmsted is not safer or as safe as it was when we had our own dispatchers. They're professional people, they're experienced. I'm disappointed in the administration, disappointed in my colleagues that voted yes. My vote is no.
Resolution 2022-55 is adopted by a vote of 4-3.
Ordinance 2022-57, an ordinance introduced by Mayor Jones authorizing the mayor to enter into a community reinvestment area, CRA, and agreement with Fieldstone Developers, Inc., and 31351 Industrial Parkway, LLC, for the construction of a warehouse/office complex in the city of North Olmsted.
Mr. President, I move to adopt 2022-57 and ask for a second.
Second.
Motion to adopt ordinance 2022-57 is made by Councilman Glassburn and seconded by Councilman Limpert. Roll call, please.
Mr. Glassburn?
Yes.
Mr. Limpert?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Heeman?
Yes.
Ms. Gilchrist?
Yes.
Ms. Williamson?
Yes.
Mr. Scarl?
Yes.
Ordinance 2022-57 is adopted by a vote of
7-0. Legislation on second reading, Resolution 2022-61, A resolution introduced by Mayor Jones authorizing the Director of Public Service to advertise for bids to award a contract for construction services at the wastewater treatment plant, WWTP, and as detailed in the specifications on file with the engineer, and further authorizing the mayor, following approval of the Board of Control, to contract for the same with the lowest and best bidder as amended.
All right, moving into scheduling meetings. Before we schedule a special council meeting, I want to clarify that the special council meeting that is already scheduled for Thursday, July 7th, 2022, will now be virtual. And then we will be calling a special council meeting on Monday, July 11th at 6 p.m. And that meeting will also be virtual.
Mr. President,
I'm sorry, I did.
Mr. President, can we have a motion to remove 2022-62 from the agenda as it was held in committee this evening?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Good catch, Law Director. Thank you.
Wasn't my catch. I think the mayor caught it.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I'd like to remove 2022-62 from the agenda and ask for a second.
Second, Mr. President.
Okay. Motion to remove 2022-62 from the agenda made by Councilman Lippert and seconded by Councilman Glassburn. Roll call, please.
Mr. Lippert?
Yes.
Mr. Glassburn?
Yes.
Ms. Gilchrist?
Yes.
Ms. Heeman?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Scarl?
Yes.
Ms. Williamson?
Yes.
Motion to remove 2022-62 from the agenda passes by a vote of 7-0. With the agenda being completed and there being no further business to come before council.
Mr. President, I'd like to schedule a finance committee meeting.
We can't hear you.
I'd like to schedule a finance committee meeting
Go ahead, Councilman.
on July 7th. And what time's the council meeting?
Say it again.
What time's the council meeting?
The 8 o'clock.
I'd like to schedule a finance committee meeting at 7:45 and ask that the economic development director be present.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm going to look both ways. Any further business before I close this out? Thank you. Sir, I'll talk to you after the meeting. We have to close the meeting. With the agenda being completed and there being no further business to come before council, the special council meeting of July 5th, 2022 is adjourned at 9:59 p.m.
I remember the question.
Did he say?